So my name's Nelson Downend, screenwriter for film and television. As far as what I like to write, I really am curious about people and psychology and trauma, and so I often write stories about the aftermath of like some traumatic event in their lives and what the human connection does in the aftermath, whether that be a positive or negative, path for them. So that can sometimes be a dark comedy like Rock Bottom, like we're doing here, or it could be mysteries, dark drama, psychological thriller. It's a great question. I think storytelling is something I've loved since I was a kid. Like I grew up listening to my parents had these audio drama records, so I would just love to put them on and probably ruin a number of records over the years when I was little. And then of course fell into 80s movies like the adventure movies, and so at first just it was the idea of just storytelling. And then as I got older, I really did just sort of become very interested in, people and the events that happen in their lives that might affect their future, their landscape, their like character fabric. And so a lot of times that was some traumatic event that maybe altered the course of their lives. And, how did that change them? How did they come back from it? Did they come back from it? And so much of my writing since then has been about in that territory. No, yeah. I mean, I kind of went through it all, certainly tried some terrible poetry when I was younger and a lot of short stories. I think that was more my favorite thing early on. And then, but cinema was always like my first love, and that type of narrative storytelling, visual storytelling. I found my way into working in makeup art when I was younger, kind of precociously, playing around at first, and then got like little jobs, even when I was like a young teen at like a makeup shop desk, and had a decent understanding of it and was accepted to an arts conservatory high school for makeup. Slowly though, I kind of shifted over, really falling in love with lighting, and maybe had a better understanding that a lot of the stories I was watching were not just fantasy, but they were dark things happening in the world. And the makeup art thing, while very interesting and creative and wonderful, was something that I maybe was less attracted to in telling those types of stories. But I did the sort of more emotional side of it all became much more interesting to me. And so working in theater, working in dance, working in opera was really something I loved. But I always kind of wanted to get back to the impetus of the story, not just sort of being a visual creator supporting the story. But I do think that kind of brought a more visual style to my like storytelling methods. And so like TV and film became a more natural fit than maybe just prose would be. Although I would love to try that someday as well. But for now, I love telling a lot with visuals and less words, more things to look at and to hear. That's an interesting question too. I think lighting's particularly connected to screenwriting. I found in that, your job as a lighting designer for a narrative drama, you really do have to understand the story. You have to understand all the story arcs. You have to understand the characters, where they are in the story, because you really are sort of helping to support those emotional moments throughout the narrative journey. And then on top of it, you're also kind of like a little bit of a production design help. You're a little bit of a DP because you really are telling people where they should be focused at any given time. So you are kind of doing close-ups. You are kind of doing wide shots. You really are thinking about the stage and how you're cutting it up. And you're also a little bit of the editor because you're really involved in transitions and how you're moving from one scene to the next. And so as I started to really formally study screenwriting, I really feel like my work in lighting over the years was a very natural sort of progression from one to the other. Probably everything about screenwriting. Yeah, I mean, it was a long journey. I think when I first started, I really just started writing. I looked at and read a number of screenplays, and I was like, I want to try this, and had never really even cracked a book. So it comes out the way it comes out at first, which is, probably some good ideas, but terrible craft and technique, and started buying some books on the topic. So, the ones that everybody would know to start with, Joseph Campbell and Save the Cat, and trying to find the balance between those two things. And then I ended up enrolling at a sort of continuing ed class at the New School, where I met one of my early mentors there and still good friends with him today. And yeah, sort of really just wanting to learn and understand the actual craft of screenwriting specifically. And so after that, I just read everything that I possibly could, just kept writing scripts, was fairly prolific. I mean, I think the theater ethic is to just keep moving forward, get it done, revise as needed, keep moving forward. And then recently, in 2019, I went back to and did a graduate school program, an MFA in TV writing. And so I'm a few years out of that, and hopefully hopefully I've gotten better. But yeah, I feel like it's every day I'm learning more and meeting new people that I learn from, and it's a great field where like you're constantly meeting other artists that teach you something every day. Coming from theater, there's like there's a pace to it, which is great. I've worked a lot in architectural lighting, and that can often take much longer to see the end product. And so I think one thing I learned from theater was, you work on something till you like it, you get eyes on it, you get some good criticism, you revise it a couple times, and then by then you've had probably 30 new ideas you want to start working on. So you pick the next thing, start working on it. And then little by little, as you learn, you're like, oh my God, this would be great for the last thing I wrote. And so all of a sudden you work on something that maybe you set down, but then 2 years later you go back because something else brought up an idea of how to revise it and make it better. But yeah, it's a hard thing in screenwriting. I mean, obviously a script is a blueprint, it's not the final piece and the final product. And so at some point it'd be like doing a blueprint for a building. If no one's going to build it, you probably want to start working on the next building. So you have it, if it's ready. You can always work on it when you need to, but I think my approach is normally more to be more prolific and just, have so many things that I would love to write in my lifetime. And so I constantly keep moving forward and hoping that something catches. I probably have like 2 or 3 things at different levels of development. If you're revising something or polishing something, you're probably excited about the new thing that you've started to outline. It's rare that I have like 3 full, like in pages projects going on at the same time. It does happen. But I also like that approach because you might hit a wall on something and you need to meditate a bit on it or take some time. But then instead of just wasting that time, you just have something else you can kind of jump onto and keep moving forward. And so I think that's normally my goal, is to just keep moving forward. But also it keeps it interesting to have multiple things. And I think I don't know enough yet about like the industry as far as like real like writers that are working all the time. But it seems like to some degree that there's a bit of that. I mean, especially in TV, that moves at such a pace that, you can't be just resting on one thing. You have to, you might be shooting one script and you're in the writer's room with another script and that needs to be ready to go in the next week. And so you have to find a way to balance that time. So I kind of like that as an approach because of the professional side of the industry, that at some point, you're going to, if you are lucky enough to be in the thick of it, you don't have the time to rest on it. You have to keep working. Yeah, I mean, early on, I didn't really know that the landscape was very, broad, and I didn't really know exactly what to do, where to submit. And so I would submit to a lot of things and did pretty well. And then over the course of time, I'd find out the things that I thought could actually give you a break or an opportunity somewhere. And so sort of narrowed my scope or field on those contests. And but I always loved them in a way that, outside of any outcome, it was more like, this gives me a deadline. I know exactly when this draft of this script is due. So I would like literally sit down with another screenwriter friend of mine and create a calendar. And it was like, okay, I want this project done for this submission date. And so it was really sort of helpful as an amateur writer or an emerging writer to just have those contests as a way to sort of organize yourself and organize your process. And now, I definitely look more specifically to the contests that I think could offer up opportunities to help you move forward with a career. It's a really good question. I feel like I've been submitting to contests probably for 10 years, and I think it was always a presence that I was aware of. Many of the publications you'll see, or many of the sites that sort of assimilate the different contests, ISA was always on there. I loved early on that ISA had a fellowship program, because as someone who was really trying to learn, like to win a fellowship is really cool, because then you have mentorship and someone can help guide you a little bit. So I know I've applied to the Fast Track Fellowship a good number of times and came close a couple of times with a few scripts. So, but yeah, I think it's always been on the radar as long as I've been submitting to contests. Yeah, so table read is one of the ones once I knew about it, I've always been submitting, mainly because, as a screenwriter, as we mentioned, you're drawing a lot of blueprints for things that for most of us will never see the light of day, and you're working really hard. And you know that at some point the likelihood is that you'll show it to a few friends, they'll give you some notes, maybe they like it, maybe they don't, and then you move on to something else, and that may just be the life of that script. So the goal of any of these is to have an audience that gets to see it, to share it with people. And so the idea of like being able to win something where they're actually going to stage something for you and bring in an audience and allow people to share in the work and allow you to work with a professional director, professional actors, a professional producer, and then actually have an audience respond in real time. It's like such a gift. I do, yeah. I was definitely. I mean, I think you at some point had been submitting to contests on and off for 10 years, and at some point, you early on you follow very diligently, and over time maybe you're a little bit lazier. But then if you get the email and you're like, holy cow, I'm on the list. That's great. And then you make the finals and you're like, wow, okay, I'm in the finals. That's cool. And then I remember getting an email from Molly who was like, hey, do you have time to do a Zoom call? We're talking to the finalists. We want to just discuss the script with you. And so I was like, sure. We made the time to meet. And we just started having this really wonderful conversation with the whole team, everyone who had read the script and sort of made the decisions in the final round. And they were just so lovely and nice to speak to about the work, all very knowledgeable. It was clear they had all read it and really paid attention and had thoughts on it. And then in the middle of that conversation, they're like, so we just want to tell you you're the grand prize winner. And I think I probably did just kind of like pause and like curse, like, holy shit. Like I really just thought this was more like a vetting interview and was completely caught off guard by that, but extraordinarily grateful. Like I couldn't believe it. And and here I'm in LA and, getting to do a live table read, which is pretty amazing. I remember getting into my first quarterfinals and being thrilled. And so to make it to a grand prize is, I think I've come pretty close a few times on a number of things that I was excited about, but to win the grand prize in this one was really extremely special. And so far, probably the best thing that's happened to me on this journey. The story is called Rock Bottom, and it is a story of an aging alcoholic and a young bulimic who meet while throwing up in the same bathroom. And they become these unlikely friends, like non-judgmental friends who kind of understand the shame that the other struggles with. And they just kind of help each other along that journey back toward recovery. And for me, it started out, so my father was an alcoholic who sobered up before I was born. So it was always this really important part of his life that he had struggled with this thing for a while. And it really was quite an accomplishment to get sober. And then he stayed sober my entire life. AA became a big part of his life. And most of our family friends were in the program, and they were just lovely people that, every now and again, somebody just would come over for dinner, and sometimes they wouldn't. And we'd learn that, maybe they were having a bit of a struggle at that moment. But my father just understood that path and was always there for those people. And so that kind of raised me in a way to feel that way about it. But as I got older as well, and I had kids of my own, had a marriage of my own, and started to have those sort of adult struggles of my own, realized that he maybe also never really got to the bottom of like where the root of his issues that caused him to drink to begin with came from. I think even maybe generationally, it wasn't something that people really did. And so for me as a parent, I was like, well, I probably need to get to the bottom of whatever I'm struggling with before I sort of translate that to my kids. So for me, my sober father became someone who, used food as a coping mechanism. And so I kind of learned to use food as a coping mechanism. And so it took me a while to really get to a place where like I understood that and how to deal with that. And so I think that was sort of the impetus for the script, is more me processing. It's not like certainly not a direct translation of my life or my father's life, but more an exploration of like my trying to understand from an adult's eyes what my father was going through that I witnessed when I was a child. No, I think it's a really great question because it's something it was very important to me to try to strike that balance. And one of the great things about the table read is that hearing it out loud or seeing actors perform it and being given great direction to really cultivate those performances really helps me understand if I was successful or not in creating that balance. But yeah, I know this is something that a lot of people struggle with on both sides, but both protagonist characters. And so I didn't want to take anything lightly. I will say, sometimes, drinking too much and eating too much, it's really fun, and the lifestyle can be fun until it's not fun, until it's kind of ruining your life. And so, yeah, I think it was important to show that part of it. There is an attraction to it. It's not just something that like, it just shows up and it's miserable. And, I mean, people do these things for a reason. We cope with these substances for a reason. So I think, there is some element of early joy and fun and a raucousness that can come from it that once you lose control of, that's when it really becomes like a serious problem. And so, but that balance, I mean, I never wanted to take lightly that, these things very quickly turn, into something that can ruin your life. And so, or at least make you lose control of your life. And yeah, it was important that the journey made that clear that this is serious. It can be funny at times. It can be just gut-wrenching and heartbreaking at times. And I wanted to show the sort of light at the end of the tunnel. Like it doesn't end in a way that where everything is resolved or fixed. I know for a lot of people, the struggle is like an ongoing daily thing. So I just wanted to end it on like a hope, not in that we fixed anything, but in finding a friend that isn't judging you or making you feel ashamed of your experience and your journey. Then that was the more important thing, I think, to show in the script. Well, I think I originally wrote it as a TV pilot, and I think just understanding more where the format should be and understanding how to tell the story. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that there aren't very personal elements to it, and then also how to make that, into something that's more driven toward like a film or a TV series and could be looked at as entertainment. And again, finding the balance of the personal and the thing that might be interesting to watch on television. So I think for me, that was the biggest struggle. Well, I got a lot of good advice when I originally wrote it as a pilot that I got, someone suggested that I do look at turning it into a feature. They thought it would make a really good feature. And so I really just embarked on that journey, and I found that they were right. I really liked it better that way. And that's when it really started having the success that it's had. And yeah, so I think that's been one of the bigger learning curves is just making sure you're using the right time to tell the right story. Yeah, so it's pretty amazing. I, flew out on Sunday, and by Monday morning we were having our first meetings, and then right into a read through of the whole script, which is really amazing and telling because I just bouncing back and forth between watching the performers do what they do and then me taking notes on like how to revise the feature script. And then after that, we moved on to the shortened version that we'll actually stage. But yeah, it's been just this extraordinary experience of like being treated so kindly and with a lot of generosity from ISA and from Table Read. And Regina Ainsworth, the director, is just her confidence and vision for this and her abilities in the room are just incredible. And so I felt very held and very cared for throughout the process. Pretty terrifying at first. Yeah, I mean, obviously I've not done this before in this way. And so the first time I didn't know exactly what I was going to expect. And as soon as I watched Regina in the room, just guiding some really talented actors embody these roles and really breathe life into them, I was kind of very calm. The first day I was very nervous walking in, and I walked out feeling like this is going to be amazing. It exceeded any expectations I could have ever had. Everyone came together and put on the most amazing performance. All I can feel is gratitude right now for the amazing artists, the collaborators on this project, the ISA and the Table Read, crew. Like I've never felt so supported in my early emerging writing career. It's been an amazing experience. I'm so happy people laughed. I'm so happy they didn't laugh when I was hoping they wouldn't laugh. When you're dealing with material like this and trying to balance the really dark stuff with things that are more humorous or have more levity. Yeah, I was excited to see that they responded in ways that I hoped they would. But it was a great audience, and I'm so grateful they came out tonight. I think always, yeah. When actors and especially professional actors at this level breathe life into something and have a director, really guiding them through that process. I've learned so much. I've had pages of notes each time, and I cannot wait to get back and dig into the script again and really fine tune it, and hope to find another audience for it again soon.